This week on Writers, Inc.
I had a lot of just story ideas that I thought would be interesting, but it wasn't until, I had a long tech career after that, and that ended up at Amazon, and I was with Amazon Prime Video, and I got to know some screenwriters and directors and showrunners, and it made me think a lot more about the way a story arc works, the way character development works, the way characterization works. And I think rubbing shoulders with people that knew how to do it really inspired me, and that made me try it again and to think about it more like a movie or a screenplay.
J.K. Rowling was nearly homeless when she wrote the first Harry Potter book. Stephen King penned Carrie in a small desk wedged between a washer and dryer. James Patterson worked in advertising and famously crafted the Toys R Us theme song long before becoming an author. Join New York Times bestseller J.D. Barker and a panel of industry powerhouses as they pull back the curtain on some of the world's most prolific authors. Where did they start? What is their process? The biggest names in publishing all have origin stories. All have tips and secrets. What does it take to consistently top the bestseller lists and become a household name? Get your notepad out. School's in session. This is Writers, Inc.
Hi, it's Christine Daigle.
Patrick O'Donnell.
And JP Rindfleisch.
And JD is away this week, so I am JD now, and we're taking over.
And we're
Kevin's
causing
gone
chaos.
too, you know.
Kevin's gone.
Who?
Who's Kevin?
Oh, ooh.
Just kidding. I've been gone for so long, everybody. I had to do it.
Yeah, so JD's gone, but he did leave us a listener question to talk about this week, so we can start off with that. I'll give it a read. Says, hi gang, your podcast is my new favorite. Of course it is. Plenty of info and always entertaining. I've written a novel and have put it through an editorial assessment and developmental edit and had it beta read.
Okay.
All have given me positive feedback about my book along with their suggestions. My plan has always been to self-publish, and I think I'm getting close, but I'm starting to get cold feet. I feel I'm too close to the manuscript and not capable of being able to tell if it's ready to publish with an unbiased eye. Any suggestions on how to deal with this? I'm leaning towards trying to get my book traditionally published so I can sleep again. Thanks, Alan. Yeah.
Oh,
So,
Alan.
yeah.
Alan.
Wow.
Oh, Alan.
Yeah, I
I
have
think
so
he's
many
being
thoughts.
very. So do I. I'm going to start out with I think he's doing all the right stuff. If this is his first novel, and he's very serious about this. First, he hired a developmental editor. They're not cheap, but when you first start out, it's a fabulous way to, hone your craft. So obviously this person, Alan, is very serious and he's doing the right stuff. He's got beta readers. He's got I think he said too, you got a regular editor too, correct?
Mm-hmm.
I think with all of those things, boy, to me, he's hitting all the right spots there. I mean, I don't know what genre it is. I don't know how long it is, obviously that kind of stuff. But at face value, hey, rock on, Alan. You're doing good.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think what's going on here might be a little bit of imposter syndrome. I have suspicions. And, I would just want to know, why do you have cold feet? I'm hoping your beta readers aren't friends and family, but just readers who love the genre.
Right.
And have given an unbiased opinion. And if that's the case, JP and I were kind of chatting about this. If you have cold feet now, wait till you start querying.
Right.
Because, the reality of querying statistically is mostly crickets or rejections. And I think post-pandemic, things have even got worse. We're like at the peak of agents taking less authors because of pandemic and other publishing things going on.
Yeah.
So,
And two, like those, if you're going this route of traditional publishing and you're going to experience some rejections, always know that those rejections are not always reflections of the quality of work.
correct.
It's right time, right place.
Yeah.
That's honestly what it is.
Yeah.
And so I think your choice here is, are you going to go the traditional route? And if you do, go for it. I think that you are at a point where you are ready. It sounds like you have done everything you possibly can to make the manuscript as good as you possibly can get it to be. So now is the time. Put it in other people's hands. Let them see if they want to take it. If you want to go the route of self-publishing, you get way more control, but that is managing your own business, and that is a whole other path.
Exactly. Yeah. And I think just like you said, if an agent doesn't pick up your book, it doesn't mean it's not a good book. I mean, there are lots of great books that don't find representation. So I'm not sure that that's maybe the unbiased eye you think it is.
Right.
Right.
And
yeah, go ahead.
The way I look at it too is, you know, Alan, if you are going to be querying this, you're going to be sending it to agents, you know, expect lots of rejection letters, but hopefully those rejection letters have some advice for you. Hopefully it's not just, hey, you're not what we're looking for. It's, man, that your main character has zero depth, or, you know, your villain isn't villainy enough, or whatever the case may be. So you have something to kind of hold on to and chew on and, you know, improve whatever you're doing. If you have more than one stranger telling you the same thing, they're probably pretty close to where there might be a deficiency. But you know what? You could always independently publish it, and then, you know, you might get discovered. Some, you know, agent will look at it and say, hey, you know what? I really like this. Let's talk. You know, also, is this going to be first of a series? You know, if you're an indie, you know, you might want to think about, okay, I've got this novel done. I'll write the next one and I'll rapid release. I'll put out one, you know, 30, 60 days later, I'll put out another. And if they're going like firecrackers, I'll write the next one and have that one in 90 days. And then you got the momentum, then the snowball will start going.
Yeah. I think it's important to know what you're getting into. Like, getting feedback from agents isn't the norm. If you get anything, you're lucky. Rapid release with, well, we're going to talk about some news then in a bit with AI coming, you know, I don't know if it's the best strategy, but I think the bottom line is self-publishing is hard and traditional publishing is hard. So you got to kind of weigh what the differences are. And, you know, if I don't think that money was a question, but like the average indie book makes about $250 for a first debut book. And the average traditionally published book makes just over $3,000. So either way, like you're not quitting your day job. It's not very likely. So either have a good day job or a spouse who can support you and give you health benefits.
That's dark, Christine.
Well, I mean, I think, you know, it is a little bleak, but I think, you know, you should know what you're getting into, right? And I think you just need to publish, but think about the pathways, which one is right for you. Like you said, JP, small pub is your own business. You have to hire all the people, which our listener has done. Market yourself, promote yourself, write like 5 more books if you're publishing on Amazon to hope that Amazon algorithm picks you up, right? Keep writing until you die or the algorithm forgets about you. And the algorithm changes for no reason. And you might make 5 figures one year and $200 the next year or go wide. But that's a learning curve too, right? So
yeah, I think the one thing Alan was saying was that he's getting cold feet, and that's normal. Everyone gets cold feet.
Absolutely.
I would say a lot of people get cold feet. And I think that that's a sign of that like internal resistance or that internal like, am I good enough question.
Yeah.
You are. Just do it.
You are.
Don't stop it, Alan.
Yeah. And I think, you know, even with traditional publishing, there were, you know, it could be crickets. It could be hundreds of rejections. Maybe you're lucky enough to get an agent and your first book goes on sub and dies, or maybe your first book doesn't sell as well. You just got to publish. You got to put the lotto ticket out there. Hope you get it lucky. Write another lotto ticket. Keep putting the books out there, whichever path you go. So hopefully that doesn't give Alan more cold feet, but I just think it's important to know, you know, what the reality is for most authors. So yeah, what the hell? Just publish. Go
Yeah,
Alan.
exactly. Well, I'm Team Alan. Go Alan. I think the fallacy that some people see is if I go traditional, I won't have to worry about all the business stuff, especially marketing.
Yeah.
And that couldn't be further from the truth. Unless you're Stephen King or, you know, like a big name, you know, maybe your publisher will help you out for a couple, 3 weeks. Then you're a desert island. You're Gilligan. You're stranded. You better start marketing yourself. You don't have a choice. You know, we've seen this time and time again with some of the guests that we've interviewed. You know, they have really good success, but they're working their butts off marketing themselves, you know, marketing their brand, marketing themselves. And their publisher is not doing that. They might help, you know, if there's momentum, they might take notice, but it's a one-man band. You got to do it. So
yeah, exactly.
hit that button.
So
You
both
can do
ways,
it.
yeah, both
You
ways
can do
are
it.
hard. Do it because you love it. Keep doing it.
Absolutely.
So with that, and thanks for the questions. We love questions. If you do send them to us, we do try to answer them. So with that, JP, what's going on in the news today?
Are you ready?
I'm ready. Do I need a shot glass?
Yeah.
I don't know.
I just have
Figure it
water.
out
I'm
yourself.
so boring tonight.
So number one in the news, Amazon's Kindle Direct Publishing will limit daily number of new titles. So this was a new bit of information from KDP platform, modifying its policies due to the rise of generative AI. There's your drink moment in publishing. The limit has been made to 3 books published per day, and that is down from a higher number previously. So interestingly enough, I think Christine, you had mentioned this, small publishers.
Yeah, or even bigger publishers.
Because when you hear the number 3 books a day, I'm sure there is a ton of reader or listeners out there that are like, are you kidding me? But this also impacts like small publishers and people that are publishing multiple different titles for different authors under one account.
Yeah, correct. It's probably 3 books is probably a lot for an individual to put out, but publishers also do put out on, KDP, Kindle Unlimited, stuff like that. So it might impact them. Apparently you can apply for an exception, but we know how long it can take to get a response from Amazon. So
it would make sense to me, and it would be reasonable if I owned like a small publishing company and say, hey, you know what? We averaged like 5 a day. Maybe not every day, but it's not, it can happen. I would think Amazon would be like, oh yeah, okay, cool. It's like me who publishes like, 3 or 4 books a year. It doesn't impact me one little bit.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's trying to, stop the flood of AI books, which makes sense. And
yes.
I think there is like a day that most people publish. I can't remember if it's Tuesday, like in the industry. So
Tuesday,
if all your books are coming out on a Tuesday, you might have to think of a different strategy, put out different days of the week.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Cool. Well, there you go. There's some bit of news for you. Next, this one I had heard about when I was away, and I had some questions of locals. So then I found this article, and it was Illinois libraries being targeted with multiple threats. So in my hometown or my home state, Illinois libraries were facing multiple threats of closure and forced closures last week. And it was due to basically this debate over book bans. It's just constantly this polarized climate. And Illinois was one of the states who recently passed a law banning book bans, which is irony, but it's because of this whole attempt at censorship and just saying that like, we're not going to do this. And so what happened is last week, a ton of libraries were getting these threats and being forced to close. And it's just wild.
Yeah.
So
closing libraries is bad. Can we all agree on that?
I think we could all agree on that. But, as far as they were closing because there was like bomb threats or something like that. So they closed them down.
Yeah. Ultimately, yes.
Okay. All right.
Yep.
But unfortunately, a lot of
threats.
these news stories get blown out of proportion. You could say a lot. There's no concrete numbers.
Yeah.
It could be 5. It could be 10. It could be 1. It could be who knows what.
Yep. So this actually happened in Chicago. And I know that it was multiple libraries because someone who I had recently met, they were working at one of the libraries and it was getting shut down, and they had heard from several others that were getting shut down. So, I mean, at the very least, it was multiple within like the same day.
Well, it's
which
not
is
good.
why.
Closing libraries is bad for authors in terms of income. It's bad for the country in terms of literacy. Please don't bomb threat libraries. I don't know what else to say about that.
Right. Unfortunately, I dealt with that a lot at work, in my previous life with schools. And I'm sure the same thing with you, Christine. You work in the school system. And it's like, okay, Junior didn't get his homework done, so he'd call in a bomb threat. Or he was pissed off at, whatever. And it got to the point where we didn't even evacuate them. Unless it was credible. I mean, we'd still sweep the school. We'd have to go through every nook and cranny, et cetera, et cetera. But, it's like, no, we're not going to let you win. Sorry. But everybody's got their own policies and, procedures and enacted and all that. And we can just all agree that it's dumb. Please don't do that. That's just stupid.
Yeah. And Another one of those lovely culture war topics. So in another article, some states were quitting the nation's oldest library group, which is the American Library Association. And it was basically facing some unprecedented partisan attacks as the accusations of the ALA leaders trying to sexualize children and etc. for explicit materials. So multiple states have cut ties with the ALA, which is it's an old tool that was used for professional development and funding libraries nationwide. Librarians crediting it for facilitating conversations and expanding perspectives. So again, this is just one of those lovely things that is happening.
It's been a rough week for libraries. Yeah.
I guess.
Librarians, we appreciate and support you.
That's right. We love you, librarians. And why pick on libraries, for God's sakes, really? I mean,
yeah. And I think it sucks that this is happening, but I think it's something to kind of continue to talk about, because I think as writers, we need to support our libraries because they are the ones carrying our books. And I think that libraries should be able to carry nearly all voices. And I think that we really need to stand up and be active in any way that we can.
Agreed.
Well, and I've said this before, if you're afraid of your child, reading something inappropriate or whatever, you should be the one censoring that, as the parent. You should be the one who's like,
what
okay,
a wild
in this
notion.
house we do. Yeah, I know. Crazy, right? I think everyone's lost their freaking minds. And, it's like, it's parenting 101. What are you watching on TV? Hopefully you're reading something, that's a good sign that they're reading books. That's a good thing, instead of staring at a phone or, a video game or whatever the case may be. So step one, going into the library, yay, that's a good practice, right? For kids. And, and as a parent, you should be the one, policing what they're reading. Pretty simple.
Yeah. Keep kids reading.
This episode is brought to you by AutoCrit. One of the most value-packed memberships for any author, AutoCrit brings you an amazing suite of tools that make it a breeze to plan, write, and edit your books all in one place. AutoCrit takes you far above standard grammar checking or cookie cutter guidance. Instead, it's like having an experienced editor in your genre watching over your shoulder to help you deliver great writing that keeps your audience trapped in the story. You can even compare your writing style to more than 100 best-selling authors right down to the word level, so you can see what the best in the business do to keep their storytelling clean, clear, and crisp. Listeners of the Writers Inc. podcast can now take advantage of lifetime membership for one single fee. That's right, no renewal fees.
Hi, this is JD Barker. I've used AutoCrit for years, and not only has it improved my writing, but it's been a crucial tool with aspiring authors that I've mentored. Whether you're a seasoned pro or just beginning, it'll help you find your weak spots and weed them out. Give it a shot with your latest project. Trust me, your editor will thank you.
Head to autocrit.com/JD to get your lifetime membership. Big thanks to AutoCrit for sponsoring the show.
Okay, cool.
Agree more.
All right. Up this
Well,
week.
who do we have on this week?
Thanks for asking. Up this
JD.
week is MP Woodward. So Mike is a veteran of both U.S. intelligence ops and the entertainment industry. As a naval intelligence officer with the U.S. Pacific Command, he scripted scenarios, moves, and counter moves for U.S. wargame exercises in the Middle East. He worked alongside U.S. Special Forces, CIA, and NSA, and most recently, he led international distribution for Amazon Prime Video and launched Amazon original content in more than 40 countries. So here he is, MP Woodward.
MP Woodward, welcome to the show.
Hey, Patrick. Thank you. Great to be here.
I saw that Mark Cameron gave you a real nice blurb for Dead Drop. I'm going to read it real quick here.
Sure.
A spectacular tale brimming with intrigue, suspense, and richly drawn characters. Fantastic storytelling. Mark Cameron. I tell you what, what does that mean to you coming from a veteran, very successful author like that? Especially an author who was also in law enforcement. This is his second career. He was a federal, he was a U.S. Marshal for a long time.
Yeah, it means a lot to me, and he's kind of a legend in the Penguin Random House / Berkeley writers writer's bullpen. Mark's well known as a guy who's done quite a lot, and obviously him having written his own set of books and the Tom Clancy series, that meant quite a bit to me. Really, all the blurbs I got from various authors meant, some of which I reached out to myself, and many of which my editor did. I was blown away and just really gratified, especially somebody who hasn't been doing this all that long.
So The Handler, your first book, that was a hit. Now, this was your first kick at the cat here. This is your first book?
Yeah, The Handler was my debut novel, yeah.
Now, what were you doing as far as writing before that? Because that's unusual that, you get that big of a hit right out of the gate.
Well, probably like a lot of writers, I tried and failed and tried again. So over the years, in my background, where I started off as an intelligence officer, where I got to see a lot of really interesting things, I had a lot of just story ideas that I thought would be interesting. But it wasn't until, I had a long tech career after that, and that ended up at Amazon. And I was with Amazon Prime Video, and I got to know some screenwriters and directors and showrunners, and it made me think a lot more about the way a story arc works, the way character development works, the way characterization works. And I think rubbing shoulders with people that knew how to do it really inspired me, and that made me try it again, and to think about it more like a movie or a screenplay than something more prosaic, we should say.
Okay. Now, Dead Drop and maybe The Handler too, when you were writing those books, since you kind of had like the TV, the streaming service background there, were you thinking of specific actors or actresses while you were writing this book? It's like, oh yeah, she would really be good as this character.
Yeah, to be honest, I did for some of them, and not all of them are like appropriate. They're like people who are just sort of lodged in your mind, and you end up thinking, wow, this kind of reminds me of this one character that I saw. So for my female character, Meredith, I wanted her to be a brunette in her 40s who was, good looking and athletic, and I kept picturing Jennifer Connelly, right?
Okay. For
whatever reason. And so interestingly enough, the book launched last year, The Handler launched right around when Top Gun Maverick was coming out, and Jennifer Connelly's in Top Gun Maverick, and I'm sitting there in this IMAX theater, and there she is, larger than life. And to me, it was like, oh my God, there's Meredith. So it really kind of sprang to life for me in a weird way.
That's very cool. Now, The Handler, your first book, like I said before, it's a hit. Now, did you feel any extra pressure writing Dead Drop? You're like, oh man, I've got to duplicate this.
Yeah. Many of the authors that I met, and I think my editor at Penguin Random House / the Berkeley imprint, he has put me in touch with several other authors in the same genre, and we meet at conferences and those kinds of things. And so for me, of course, it was an opportunity to soak up a lot of knowledge about what's this like. And almost the first thing I heard was, hey, anybody can write one. And it was like, I don't mean to put extra pressure on you, but that second book is really, really important. And then I would hear over and over again, the second book is the hardest one to write, and these things. And for sure, you're under contract, you have an obligation to deliver something on time. And I definitely put a lot of pressure on myself. Looking back, probably more than I needed to, but that's kind of how I work. I work better under pressure, and so maybe some of that was a good thing.
Yeah, I was going to ask you, how did you deal with it? I mean, I always go back to music. It's like many bands, like their first album's a hit, And then their sophomore effort, usually,
sophomore jinx.
Yeah, it doesn't work out so great. And it's like, well, I've had my whole life to write that first album. The second one, I got 9 months, and it's like, oh shit, I got to get going.
I think the positive thing, I try to accentuate what I had going for me by going into a second book, which was a continuation of a first, and that is that the characterizations are largely done. You know your characters, and you can go deeper into their attitudes. And I happen to be of the opinion that characterization is the most important thing. We could probably brainstorm a couple of novel plot ideas while we were on this podcast, right?
Sure.
But executing them, I think, takes really good characterization, because it's about how your heroes and villains and protagonists and antagonists respond to situations. And if they respond like the people, like the reader expects them to, because they know them, then that's the fun, is putting those personalities in very trying situations and watching what they do.
Oh yeah, you can't just have your main character have a decent life. You got to put them in peril.
In peril, and every conversation needs to be conflict. And,
oh yeah,
and the stakes need to be constantly rising, and all those things that have to, and that story has to be told through dialogue and sharp characterization, in my opinion.
Absolutely. Now, I want to rewind a little bit to your career in naval intelligence. You hear the term naval intelligence. What exactly is that?
Well, usually the joke is it's an oxymoron, right? But
I didn't say that. I was going.
I know. You were tempted. I could tell. So in every, let me start at a high level. There are something like 17 intelligence agencies in the U.S. and the Central Intelligence Agency was originally set up to be truly central, and then after 9/11, the government, after the white papers and things came out, the government decided that coordination had not been as good as it should have been.
Sure.
So they created the Office of the Director of National Intelligence. So now all the heads of the intelligence agencies are subordinate to the Director of National Intelligence. Well, included in those agencies, there are the branches of military intelligence, and they somewhat, almost in a matrixed way, roll up to the Defense Intelligence Agency. Now, in all of that, there is the Office of Naval Intelligence, whose primary job is to support the Navy as warfighters with strategic and tactical intelligence, so that naval commanders make the best decisions. So at a tactical level, that means junior officers out there, typically on aircraft carriers or with strike groups, helping to analyze an enemy situation, a lot of times an integrated air defense system, for example, and helping to inform a strike group commander of the threats. And then as you progress through your career, it becomes more and more strategic. And at some point, you're not advising an air wing commander, you're advising an admiral. But the job remains the same, and that is to collate the information coming in from the national intelligence agencies, along with your own knowledge and the things that you're hearing from other folks in the Navy, to create a coordinated picture that helps a decision maker.
Yeah, I did my homework, and I guess naval intelligence is the oldest member of the military intelligence family.
That's probably not surprising. I think the Navy, I'm trying to think of the dates. We used to celebrate the Navy birthday, but it wouldn't be surprising in that one of the things that I think is different about the Navy from the other services, particularly way back then, is that it's always been global, right? Ships are always in foreign ports, and there have been naval attaches in foreign embassies forever. And so I think, given the global network of just fleets in general, it would make sense to me that they would be providing information.
So could you kind of give us a synopsis of your Navy career? Were you retire as an officer?
Oh yeah, I was an officer, and I went straight in as a naval intelligence officer, and didn't know it at the time, but it was tremendous training to become a novelist. In that it's what was cool about at least my experience was this was just as the Cold War was ending into Desert Storm, right up until about 9/11. And so in that period of relative peace, my job was really to prepare the Pacific Fleet. I was with the U.S. Indo-Pacific Command, and the idea there was we were constantly monitoring what's the situation with China, what's the situation with the former Soviet Union. There was a lot of grappling at the time around littoral warfare and the future there. What would the Navy's strategic objectives be going forward? One of the more memorable experiences I had was there's a command ship for U.S. Indo-Pacific Command at the time called the USS Blue Ridge, and I was on the Blue Ridge as an intelligence officer. And at that time, the Chinese were lobbing missiles across the Taiwan Strait because they were already rattling sabers. And it was super interesting because at the time, Bill Clinton was president, and there were video conferences with National Command Authority on what to do about this on the Blue Ridge. And what was cool about my career was the fact that I often got to be a fly on the wall as some of those senior intelligence people and policymakers decided what to do. And that was just invaluable for me just as a person to learn things.
Did you ever get a chance to do any, what a layman would call like spy stuff, fun, intelligence stuff?
I mean, I think as a naval intelligence officer, it's not like you're, going undercover and those kinds of things. It's not to be confused with the CIA. That said, some of the tactical missions where you get to be with units that are forward deployed, you do get to do some things like that and witness things on the ground and then report on them. And so sure, I got to do some of that.
Now, before I hit record, we were talking about our friend Rick Prado from the CIA.
Yeah.
And, how can I phrase this? How closely or what was the relationship between like naval intelligence and the CIA?
Yeah, I think the primarily when you're the intelligence officer with a unit, your job is to collate information coming in from the National Intelligence Agency. So it's funny you mentioned Rick Prado because he and I had an exchange on an email because I had read his book and he had been in the Philippines the same time that I was. And at the time I was an intelligence officer attached to, it was called ComNav US Philippines, but it was basically the admiral in charge of the Philippines. And I was a junior officer on that staff. And we were worried about things like communist insurgencies from the New People's Army, the Mindanao Liberation Force, basically various insurgencies, because at the time it was sort of the mop up of the Cold War, and the various governments were still worried about these communist insurgencies. And Rick Prado was out there, on the front lines undercover, I think at that time, at least according to his book.
Yes.
Going against the New People's Army. And the reason that I reached out to him is because one of the stories he recounted was going up to Clark Air Force Base, which is no longer a U.S. Air Force Base, but at the time it was a big one. And Mount Pinatubo erupted while he and I happened to both be in the Philippines, coated Subic Bay, QB Point, and Clark Air Force Base in about 4 feet of ash. So much so that there was a KC-10 tanker up at Clark Air Force Base. It was so heavy on the horizontal stabilizers of the jet that this giant airliner was sticking up, like the weight had caused it on the ground to do that. The BC-10, effectively. And so Rick talks about how he went up early to secure things. I happened to go up on a helicopter flight probably weeks later, and we were doing the same thing. We were collecting equipment, basically.
Right, just getting ready to bug out. Yeah.
So I was probably on the end of reports that he was writing and preparing them for the staff.
That's funny. So, with your newfound career here as a novelist, do you have to get your books vetted by the government?
I do. I follow all those rules. It's it's not too challenging if you footnote everything, and I stay very far away from anything that would actually be classified there. And I think there's narrative ways to do that.
Okay, gotcha. So, how long of a process is that?
Couple weeks, sometimes months.
Yeah, I remember.
However, I mean the process of publishing versus every other industry I've ever been in is quite slow. I mean, it's a year before you turn in a finished manuscript to your editor, and it's in print. And so you go through a couple of editorial turns, but there's plenty of time to have things vetted.
Yeah. I was talking to Jack Carr. Actually, I interviewed him, and he was talking about that, and I'm like, man, that sounds like a pain in the butt, but whatever.
Yeah.
So, do you talk to anyone at work, like from naval intelligence, your old work, about your books? And what's the feedback you're getting?
I do. Usually they enjoy hearing names and remembering.
Do they say, "Hey, that sounds like"?
Yeah, exactly. I probably one of the paradoxes of being an intelligence officer is that you're usually the only intelligence officer in a particular kind of unit. So you have some friends who do the same thing that you do, but the majority of friends from your service are pilots and SEALs and submariners and guys that you worked with that way. And I found my 8 years in the service, 12 if you count the training portions, but I forged friendships there that are absolutely lifelong, and you get back together with us. In fact, I had two pilot friends who were in Seattle last week. We went out to dinner, and other than we all look a little different, it was almost exactly like no time had passed.
Oh, that's awesome.
Whatsoever. Same jokes, same stuff. So they all like to remark on the books, and of course I like those guys all made careers of the Navy, and so it's an opportunity for me to ask some questions too.
Yeah. Now the term dead drop, that's your new novel that's coming out very soon. Some may not know what that means. What is it?
Well, a dead drop in classic intelligence terms is when a spy is trying to communicate with his handler in a covert way and puts a package or something like that under a park bench, and then the handler comes by and gets it, and it's a real world thing. And in fact, they arrested a civilian, I think about a year and a half ago. I forget the guy's name, but he and his wife had tried to sell submarine technology to the Soviets. The Russians. Yep. And it was never released, and I don't know. I've only gone off of what I read in the papers. But a foreign government became aware of it and tipped the FBI, and then the FBI went in and imposed. And one of the ways that they caught him was via a dead drop. And if I remember correctly, they put a memory stick inside a peanut butter jelly sandwich and left that somewhere. And that's what the FBI collected. But in my book, the term has two meanings. There is some of that spycraft, but the thing that triggers all the events is that effectively a dummy warhead on a missile is discovered by an Israeli submarine, and so they call that a dead drop because it was a dummy. But they're very worried about what that could portend.
Gotcha. In this world of electronics and I don't know, technology just is going at a hyper speed. Something as simple as dead drops, I guess they're still used. I was talking to like Rick Prado and Jack Barsky from the KGB, and it's like, at least that way it can't be hacked, right?
Well, this is the paradox, I think, of technology and intelligence, and it's a really fun area to explore as a writer. But the there's an Israeli company called NSO, for example, with a program called Pegasus that's been in the news, and foreign governments have been buying it, and the NSA has been worried about it because it's hard to hack, but it effectively turns every cell phone into a broadcast, into an intelligence service, right? And so, as much as we could think about data communications being an efficient way to get information across, it's also exposure. And so I think a fun thing to explore is the idea that spies or even just governments and military organizations that have become over-reliant on smart technology all of a sudden can't use it because it's been tapped or compromised in some way. So they have to fall back to old methods of tradecraft. And we could probably brainstorm 5 characters right now that'd be fun to watch them have to do that, right?
Absolutely. Now, after the Navy, you started working with Amazon?
I had a career that took me through tech. I was with a startup for a while in wireless data. Long career in wireless. I was with AT&T for 10 years in the cell phone groups, and then Amazon after that. Yeah.
Okay, so you went with Amazon. Now, Amazon isn't some secret government entity or anything like that, right?
Every company has its secrets. Trust me. every company. Well, I mean, there's every company these days, in all seriousness, is very worried about protecting customer data and information security in general, obviously, as ransomware, bad guys hacking things. So it's been interesting somewhat for me to watch companies start to take on many of the protocols that I saw in the government. And I think at this point, they're frankly not all that different.
Sure. Now let's get to Dead Drop. Dead Drop, could you give us a quick synopsis of your newest book?
Sure. As I mentioned, it kicks off with the idea that an Israeli submarine picks up a missile in the Eastern Mediterranean that's of Iranian design, and it is modified, and it has a dummy warhead. But there are some clues on that dummy warhead that would suggest that it might take a nuclear warhead. And the missile itself had launched out of Lebanon and was launched by Hezbollah. And Hezbollah is a proxy group of Iran. And so the thrust of the novel is that Israel and the Mossad are hyper aggressive on wanting to get to the bottom of this. That puts them in conflict with the U.S., where the administration is actually close to a new nuclear accord with Iran. And so the Israelis see this as an existential threat. The Americans see it as a mystery yet to be solved. And ultimately, the spies working in Mossad and CIA, first are at conflict, and then I won't provide the spoiler as to how it gets resolved. But that's what it's about.
Now, this is the second in your Handler series, correct?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. Okay.
Now, when you're writing this book, and I guess the Handler as well, did it bring back memories? Did you start getting flashbacks or dreaming of the old days when you were in the Navy?
Oh, completely. I think every novelist in this genre. I mean, you mentioned Jack Carr, for example, or Rick Prado is not a novelist, but you're effectively mining your experiences and then changing them and molding them to be what these characters would do. But that's where, at least my background, it came in so handy, because I did have a lot of varied experiences in the military services and overseas and with foreign governments. But then also at Amazon, I happened to be in an international group for Prime Video, and we did business in 40 countries, and so all that travel, meeting all those people, all those things helps inform characterization and settings and plot.
Yeah, it is interesting how you start writing something and all the stuff, it's like a floodgate opens up sometimes. memories that, were stored way back in the back of your head. And it's like, oh shit, I just had a dream last night about X, Y, or Z. I'm writing a crime drama like series right now. And to tell you the truth, I mean, like I had some like really bad PTSD, and all of a sudden it's like, I wake up in the middle of the night. I'm like, whew, okay, we're back to this again. All right.
I could definitely see where that would happen, because there's a certain intensity, when you're in the right frame of mind, I think, for writing that. And
right.
I call it the third eye, and it's kind of a combination of the memories that you're having and the things that you're exposing. And at least for me, I can look up from my keyboard and realize like, oh my gosh, 4.5 hours have passed. I thought it was one. That kind of thing. It's a great way to kill time on a plane.
That's a good thing. Yeah, it's better than staring at your computer and it's like, oh, what next? Yeah, it's like if you're in the flow.
Absolutely. And I try to feel like I'm telegraphing thoughts or telegraphing a story as opposed to writing one and making one up. That may sound nuts. Sometimes I feel nuts doing that, but that's that when I'm in the right frame of mind, that's how it feels to me.
Gotcha. Now, you have a unique perspective and background compared to the average bear, and when it comes to matters of like national security, all that kind of thing. What do you think in the world today? What are some of the biggest threats or the biggest threat to the country?
Oh, I mean, there's three. One is China, the biggest one. Its junior partners are Russia and Iran. And I think the threat is the state of the country. It is, if you read Sun Tzu, it's the first thing that he based his whole theory. And this is a guy writing in 600 BC.
Right. Yeah.
His whole point is, if your enemy is divided, you're halfway there. And when I look at the political divisions in the country, I find it depressing, and I think it's exploited by those that have not liked the Pax Americana. So I think the globalization that started since World War II, I think was a wonderful thing. But then I think at some point in the 90s, when it really got going and the Cold War ended, that a certain amount of complacency set in our defense establishment, and unfortunately that accelerated over time. That didn't turn around. And I do sense that right now there's a consciousness of this issue, but look, we're running record deficits in our budget. That's not going to bode well for a defense establishment that's going to need to be modernized. I look at the military today. The aircraft and systems that I see are largely not that much different than they were 30 years ago. There are some, changes at the margins,
sure,
but that's a problem. And adversarial governments have seen how we use those tactics in Iraq, most recently, or Afghanistan. So just as we've had maybe hardened veterans, we've also depleted our equipment and given the other guys a lesson on how we fight. So all of this is to say that I don't like to think that we're going to always be at war, but I think deterrence is super important. And sure, the more that we showed, disunion and let our own forces sort of deteriorate, obviously the more that deterrence level falls. And you compare that to, I look at the Chinese Navy, which had never been what we call a blue water Navy, projecting power. Well, now it is. They're churning out these enormous destroyers, like one a month, and if freedom of the seas is important to us, and it is, because we import just about everything in this country, it's manufactured elsewhere. Then that's a major threat. And that's something that I hope our policymakers are taking very seriously.
Interesting. What do you think about the threat of AI? I mean, it's here. It's not going away.
Yeah, couple things. One, I think it's super significant. I think it's going to continue to evolve, as you sure, say. There are some voices now saying, hey, we need some policies on this. I also think that we need to be careful not to overhype it. AI has been something and machine language has been something that's been around for a while now.
Right.
I was at Amazon in 2014 when we launched Alexa. Well, what is Alexa? But another earlier version of Chat GPT. So but that said, it will get smarter and smarter and smarter by its own very nature. I mean, that's almost what defines it. And we will continue to see, I think, humans removed from the equation, and that will certainly be true for weapon systems. And that is a scary thought, And
yeah, it is. Skynet might take over. You never know.
Skynet, yeah. I'll be back. Yeah.
Yes. So we're getting close to the end of our chat here. What are some of the writing lessons that you've learned, writing these last couple of books that would maybe help out, beginning writers or writers that are kind of in a funk, they're kind of stuck in the middle, or, you're pushing that boulder up the mountain, it feels like, and it's like, what are some of the lessons that you learned or some advice that you can give?
Sure. First off, I have learned that everyone's process is different. So if there's a writer out there that has a process that they feel like is different from somebody else's they've read about, that's not necessarily a bad thing. So I'll share what my process is, which is to start with a story at a high level and a synopsis, and then to break that down into a very rough outline, certainly not line by line, and then to write a first draft all the way through, and knowing that a lot of it's going to have to get changed, that a lot of it's just terrible, but working out in my own head the way the story functions with multiple characters, settings, plot, subplot, etc. And then once getting all the way through, then going back and starting over again, and with now knowing what's going to happen. And in that mode, you, the author, can decide what you want to present to the reader, much the way a filmmaker would present some scenes, but leave mysteries or other things, or clues, but mysteries. And so now that you know what's going to happen, you can do that. So that's what my advice would be if you wanted to imitate my process.
This episode is sponsored by the book marketing experts at Written Word Media. They know that marketing your book can be a challenge, and that's why they make marketing simple by providing quick, easy, and effective ways to promote your books. When you schedule a promotion with Written Word Media, your book is emailed to tens of thousands of readers who love your genre. It's exposure that's hard to find any other way. You can even choose a ready-made promo stack that includes multiple promos over a short period of time to help boost your title's rank on retailers like Amazon. The best part? Scheduling your promo only takes 5 minutes and comes with world-class customer service. Over 30,000 authors trust Written Word Media with their book marketing. See why at writtenwordmedia.com today.
Okay. Last week, we talked about blurbs. And during the interview, he talked about how Mark Cameron of Tom Clancy fame blurbed his book. And that was a huge deal for him. So my question to you guys is, have you ever solicited one? Have you ever tried to get one from a mid-lister or a big name?
I have given 2 blurbs, but I've never solicited one, so no.
I haven't, but I'm thinking that I might, but I haven't for anything yet.
I have a part 2 to the question. I have a part 2. Part 2 is, if you could, you've got this magic book wand where you could get a blurb from any author, who would it be? Mm-hmm. And why?
TJ Klune, hands down. Hands down.
Why?
Because the stuff that I personally write is more of that cozy, feel good, queer fiction, and I honestly feel like TJ Klune has a lot of the qualities of that genre that I would love to be able to be somehow linked to in a positive way. So if I had the ability to request a blurb and get one from that would be amazing.
So somebody that you look up to and somebody that's in your genre.
Yeah.
Would you ever consider somebody that wasn't? Because this is a free pass.
I don't know.
Yeah, it's just like, this is the magic book wand that I've got right now. That hey, you know what? You can get it from whoever you want.
Yeah, I mean, of course, there's potential, but I think that would be the most logical of them. Okay. So I think I'm gonna leave it there.
Sweet.
That's an interesting question. Christine? I write too many genres. So I'm like, I don't know which book. Because I write sci-fi, I write some thriller stuff. So I guess maybe Blake Crouch, because that's both. You can just give me a general blurb and I'll put it everywhere. But yeah, that's an interesting question, because I'm like, would something outside your genre do what you hoped it would do? I tend to think maybe not, but maybe if it was someone like Stephen King or James Patterson, sure. But maybe
I think people would take notice of that. So. Yeah. Maybe JD Barker.
How about you?
Blurb one of our books.
JD, please blurb all of our books.
Yeah. JD,
oh, wait, now it's failing. Thanks, JD. Can you imagine if it had the opposite effect? It's like, hey, great.
It wouldn't. No, it wouldn't.
No.
What about you, Patrick? Who would you want to blurb your book?
Oh, boy. Mark Cameron, I'm thinking about that because we're friends and he knows me. So that would be very cool. But Jack Carr, Brad Thor, somewhere in that universe. And yeah, Joseph Wamba's dead, so he can't do one for me. But
that would be impressive, though.
Maybe Michael Connelly. I wouldn't mind having him do it for me as well. So what effect it would have, who knows? But I think we talked about it last week. A good general blurb would be awesome instead of book specific. Christine is a super duper author that really digs into her characters. That you could recycle from book to book to book to book, which is what I would milk the shit out of that, wouldn't I? All right. Yeah. MP talked about how at first he failed as a writer. Then he thought of his stories more like a movie or a screenplay. This is when he was working for Amazon Prime and he's starting to get to know directors and showrunners, that kind of stuff. And he said that really turned things around for him. Do you guys do that when you're writing?
Sort of. I think, and again, I think it depends what you're writing, but I think for some genres, readers really like cinematic or visual writing. Mm-hmm. So I do intentionally try to think, is this scene visually exciting or cinematic?
Yeah, I think in movies, if that makes sense.
I do too. So, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So I kind of write in like that cinematic-esque style, or like as I'm writing, I'm the camera, and so I'm like seeing what I'm panning into and all this stuff. So yes. To your question.
Yeah, and for me, especially when there's like an action scene, I'm thinking big screen, what would it look like? You're trying to draw the reader into it, and you're trying to paint that picture of like a really cool like fight scene or car chase or whatever the case may be. I think if you can pull that off, you're doing pretty good. And I asked him, and I ask a lot of my authors when I interview them, when you're writing a book, do you think of a specific actor or actress for that role? Do you guys do that? And who would it be? Like I got the magic, book wand here. Any actor, actress that you could think of. And I know it's specific to, like characters, etc. But who would you like?
So I know what you're getting at, but I'm going to turn your tool.
Okay.
Because what I do is especially with writing with co-authors, I really like to think about cast building in terms of who the cast characters are from explicit shows. So like if I want to write a sassy character and I'm doing something like Nerds, which is basically Brooklyn Nine-Nine meets Ghostbusters, then I'm going to be writing a Rosa character. So I'm going to have Rosa as my picture because that's the character that I'm emulating. So that would be like the face and everything. I would use them to picture that character. So I'm not like looking for dream actors and actresses as much as I'm looking for who fits the role that I'm basically casting in the novel. In the character that they're playing or portraying as.
Yeah, right. I do something similar, and I do cast like most of my main characters. It can be up to 10 of them that I'll have pictures, especially if I'm co-writing because we have to remember hair color, eye color. We write
Sure.
all of that. But for my sci-fi series, definitely would be Colin Morgan as the awkward Merlin, because that is my character to a T. Beautifully awkward, and I just love awkward characters.
Okay. Yeah, for action, I'm a big James Bond guy, so Daniel Craig, I thought next to Sean Connery, Daniel Craig was like the best Bond because of his grittiness,
What about
especially
Pierce,
because
man?
he's too pretty. He's a pretty boy. I'm sorry. He when I think
What
of
about
James Bond, I'm like, no. George Lansbury. He was in one James Bond. We'll give him that. But Daniel Craig in Casino Royale had that grittiness, and his character was so good. There's so many different facets to it, and you're just like, yeah, that's who I would want for sure. But hey, that's just me. So before you listen to this, did you know what a dead drop was?
It was in there.
I don't know, but it made sense to me, like intuitively.
Yeah.
So
yeah,
I was like, oh yeah.
Have you ever
makes
heard that
sense.
term before, like in Spyville?
I think
like
I
in
have.
spy movies and such?
Yeah.
Yeah, I have, definitely.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
what I like about it is it's still being used. I interviewed a retired CIA guy and a retired KGB guy, and they both used dead drops all the time. You can't hack.
Right. Yeah.
AI can't go into under that rock in the park and grab that thumb drive. In some of these guys, they just pass notes, and they literally they read it and then they set it on fire, and that's the end of it. So that's super cool spy stuff.
Yep. That makes a lot of sense to me.
And it's still going on. It still happens. Spycraft. You gotta love it.
Cool.
When he was writing his books, he really had some flashbacks. Brought back a lot of memories from when he was working. And the same thing has happened to me, really bad, staying up at night, flashback kind of stuff. How about you guys? Is there certain things when you're writing that really spark vivid recollections in your lives, either traumatic or the exact opposite, joyful?
Yeah.
Patrick, I write happy stuff for a reason.
I'm like, my work just gives me secondary trauma and flashbacks in general. So,
No, so I do intentionally write happier things, and no, I don't have those problems. But for example, when I had some shorter poetry and fictions that was explicit to certain themes about my losing my grandfather to dementia. Yeah, that was really rough, and I had to perform it 3 days in a row in front of a bunch of people. And
oh wow,
let me tell you, that was fun.
Yeah.
But including my parents, which was a joy in and of itself. So yes, that was not fun. I have experienced that, but I do like to write more joyous things for a reason.
Okay.
Yeah.
Christine?
Yeah, no, I try to stay away from most of that kind of stuff. The things that usually get me are things that are more personal. So if I'm writing about something that was because I want to get some real emotion in there for the reader. So if it was a personal spot of grief of, illness or death or something I had to deal with my child that was difficult, that can be. But the work stuff, it usually only gets me at work. I try to leave it out of the writing.
All right. On that cheery note,
yeah, who's up next week? Oh, that's me. Okay.
That's you.
So,
who's up next week, Christine?
Up next week, it's Daniel Swearenbecker. Daniel is an author, television writer, and playwright living in Los Angeles. His play Stress Positions premiered in New York City at the Soho Playhouse. He's from Manhattan, and he's the author of the novels The Ones, The Equals, and his new novel, Kill Show. And if you'd like to be notified as soon as new episodes publish, make sure you go to writersincpodcast.com and sign up now. We'll see you next episode and have a great week of writing.
Thanks for listening to this episode of Writers Inc. Access the show notes and leave a comment at writersincpodcast.com.